10, the U.S. Senate debate.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this 3TV special, the U.S. Senate debate. I'm Frank Camacho. Joining us tonight, the candidates for one of Arizona's 2 U.S. Senate seats. That seat currently held by Republican John McCain. Mr. McCain is with us tonight. He is the Republican nominee. John McCain has served 4 terms in the U.S. Senate as well as 2 terms in the House. A graduate of the Naval Academy and a U.S. Navy veteran, he was also a Vietnam POW. Senator McCain is the author of several books, including Faith of My Fathers. Next to the senator is David Nolan, the Libertarian candidate. Mr. Nolan is a founding member of the Libertarian Party. He is the originator of the Nolan chart, which shows how different political systems relate to one another. His career focused on advertising, marketing, and publishing. He holds a degree in political science from MIT. Next is Mr. Jerry Jocelyn, the Green candidate. He is a small businessman, having founded American Postal Company and Scottsdale Systems. He is a former associate publisher of the New Times. He served in the California Air National Guard and the Arizona National Guard. He is also the first Senate candidate endorsed by the Green Party. And the Democratic nominee for Senate is Mr. Rodney Glassman. He is a former vice mayor of Tucson. He is a JAG officer in the Air Force Reserve. He has experience as a small businessman and community activist, having founded a number of community organizations. He has his PhD in arid land resource sciences. Tonight's debate is a formal debate. The questions were formulated by 3TV with input from our partners at the Arizona Guardian. None of the candidates have been given the questions in advance. We will ask directed questions to each candidate, who will be given 90 seconds to answer. The other candidates will have a 45-second rebuttal. The original candidate will have a 30-second final response. The order was determined by drawing numbers, so let's begin now with Mr. David Nolan. Mr. Nolan, you have warned Americans the zeal for secure borders must not be used as an excuse leading to an erosion of civil liberties and a backdoor to a national ID program. How do you balance securing the border with protecting civil liberties?
That's an excellent question. As a libertarian, I believe civil liberties should always be protected. I think often in times of trouble, this country has a tendency to overreact to the crisis of the day. Much of the problem on our national borders, I believe, stems from the fact that we have made it far too difficult for well-intentioned, good, honest people to get into this country. We need to make it far easier for people who wish to come here to work, to raise a family, to start a business, and at the same time make it more difficult for people with bad intentions. If we allowed in the 95% plus who are good, honest people to come here with minimum paperwork and minimum hassle, you could then presume that the people trying to get across the border illicitly were there for bad purposes. After all, if they were here for good purposes and could prove that they were not terrorists, that they were not laden with communicable diseases, that they were not criminals, we could assume that the remaining small handful sneaking across the border at night were here for bad purposes, and it would be far easier for the National Guard or whomever we wanted to station on the border to intercept them. I do not believe we need to build a large, expensive wall. Americans should always remember that big walls are often used to keep people in as well as out. And if America ever turns fascist, we don't want to be in a big, giant prison.
Okay, Mr. Nolan, thank you. Senator McCain.
Well, David, strangely enough, I agree with you to this extent. We need high walls and we need wide gates. We need to have good trade and exchanges between our 2 countries and all of our countries, both on our north and south border. But the fact is that there is a serious national security situation that has developed in Mexico over the last 3 years. Our Secretary of State just last week said that it was comparable to the insurgency that they had in Colombia back in the 1980s. We have to get our border secured because of the drug cartels, because of the terrorist activities and methodology that is being used in Mexico. The 10th mayor of Mexico was just assassinated. We need to get our border secure. Then we can move on to addressing the other issues associated with illegal immigration.
Thank you, Senator McCain. Mr. Glassman.
Frank, the key to both securing the border and balancing civil liberties is to have a United States Senator for Arizona that's focused on securing our border and not just talking about it. The fact is, under Operation Jumpstart in Texas and under Operation Gatekeeper in California, resources were ramped up on those two borders. Yet in Arizona, we did not have the same investment in Border Patrol agents and customs agents in the infrastructure necessary to protect our border, yet at the same time allow for commerce. It takes over an hour for most individuals to walk across the border in San Luis or in Nogales by foot, and it can take over a day to a day and a half for a truck of produce to come across. That's because we have not had a champion for securing our border and promoting commerce, which is what I plan to do as Arizona's next U.S. Senator. It's about action, and it's about moving our state forward and getting our fair share to protect our border as well.
Mr. Jocelyn, you're next.
We will never control the border as long as control immigration, as long as 40% of the people that are here illegally are flying over the border in planes. They're coming over on visas, student visas, work visas, and so forth, and they're just letting their visas expire. Focusing on the fence doesn't really make sense. As someone once said in 2007, I think it was our senior senator, the fence is the least effective way to stop immigration. What I would do is adopt a comprehensive program that would turn a cost center into a revenue source. That is, I would regulate and tax people that are here illegally, cap the number of people that are here, and raise $1.2 billion a year. 500 million would maybe be spent on the program, and we'd have real revenue, about 700 million for Arizona.
Mr. Jocelyn, thank you very much. Mr. Nolan, you do get the last word.
Yes, the point that was raised about the drug cartels, that's a real problem, but the solution from a libertarian perspective is to decriminalize drugs so that the people who want drugs aren't forced into the arms of the criminal syndicates. If we decriminalize drugs for adults and made them readily available by a prescription in the United States, that would cause the drug cartels to completely collapse, and that would end most of the violence on the Mexican border.
Okay, thank you. The next question is for Mr. Glassman. Some economists have warned that no matter what we do domestically, our foreign debt, specifically to China, could jeopardize any economic stimulus. What should the Congress do to stop the flow of capital to China? And should we try to lure manufacturing jobs back to the United States? And how do we do that?
Frank, Arizonans, it's time to turn the page. The reality is that the U.S. Senator that we've had in Arizona has been a champion for exporting jobs, and a champion for world trade, and a champion of everything except for getting Arizonans back to work. The number one way that we can make a stronger U.S. economy is by focusing on jobs for Americans. The fact is that when Boeing goes to build, when the Navy goes to purchase planes, they can be built by Boeing. Right here in Mesa, we can build the parts right here, or they can be built by Airbus in France. We've had a champion for sending those jobs overseas for far too long. The reality is we need someone focused on creating jobs here at home. We need a second stimulus, and that stimulus needs to be focused on infrastructure jobs to get Arizonans working again, building our bridges, protecting our infrastructure, and making sure that our tax dollars stay home. Just the other day, I was in Surprise, Arizona, and I was visiting with a paint contractor named Chuck. Chuck drives into town every time that he's going to make purchases for his business because he wants his tax dollars to stay right within the community where he's living. I salute Chuck, and I wish that we had a United States Senator that had the same belief that we need to keep our tax dollars at home by investing in ourselves, by stimulating our own economy. That's how we're going to be able to reduce our debt in the long term, because we're going to be able to create the revenue necessary for a strong economy to invest in our infrastructure. It's about putting Arizona first, just like Chuck put Surprise first with his tax dollars.
Mr. Glassman, thank you very much. Mr. Jocelyn.
We have a big problem. We have a structural problem in this country, and it's basically a demand problem. My solution to both balancing the budget and getting more jobs going and stimulating the economy is a flat tax. I believe we should have a tax where everybody pays the same amount of tax, whether they make their money from inheritance, like some of us, or whether they make their money from trading stocks, capital gains, or whether, like the great majority of the middle class, they make their money by getting up in the morning and going to work. My flat tax would have a $20,000 standard deduction for every citizen, and everybody would pay 28% over that. But that would eliminate the payroll tax. And the payroll tax, 4 out of 5 Americans pay more in payroll tax than they pay in income tax. It would lower the...
Mr. Jocelyn, I'm sorry, but your time is up. Mr. Nolan.
Yes, I'm kind of amused that Mr. Glassman, like every Democrat I've ever met, thinks the answer is, quote, stimulus, more government spending, take money away from the people who actually produce things and shuffle it off to public employee unions and other people who exist at the largesse of the government. That's exactly the opposite of what we need. To stimulate growth and to create jobs, we need to reduce spending by at least 50%, eliminate the annual deficit, and reduce our national debt. If we do not do this in the near future, this company will be bankrupt and our economy will be destroyed. Americans will wind up as indentured servants to the Chinese unless we radically cut back on the size and cost of government at all levels.
Senator McCain.
Well, we need to stop spending because we owe the Chinese some $850 billion or more. We do need to have a currency adjustment. The Chinese have adjusted their currency, have manipulated their currency in a way that's unfair to the United States of America. One of the ways of keeping those jobs in the United States of America is cut the corporate income tax, corporate tax. Corporate tax in America is 35%, the second highest in the world. So if you own a corporation and you have a choice to go where in the world, obviously it's going to be difficult to remain in the United States of America. We need free trade. We need to open barriers to American goods and products. I believe the American worker is the most productive, most professional, and best worker in the world that can compete against anybody. But we have to level the playing field between the United States and China.
Thank you, Mr. McCain. Mr. Glassman, you get the last word.
Thank you, Frank. I applaud John McCain for being an advocate for lowering taxes for corporations. But the fact is we need to focus on Arizonans. We need to get Arizonans back to work, and we need to talk about what we can do to lower taxes for Arizonans. Because of the inaction of our current Congress and our current senators, coming this December 31st, taxes on lower and middle class Arizonans and Americans are going to be increased because there's going to be taxes expiring. That's the kind of inaction we don't need in Washington, D.C. We need a U.S. Senator focused on the future, and that means focused on planning ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question is for Senator McCain. We'll stay on the economy. You've talked about cutting the corporate tax. Also, you've called the effort by Democrats to abolish the Bush tax cuts as, quote, class welfare. Are you saying that extending the tax cuts and also cutting the corporate tax will result in jump-starting the economy? And if so, what does that do to our deficit?
I think there's a number of things that we have to do to jumpstart our economy, but let's start out by stopping the spending. The stimulus package has obviously been an utter failure, which I understand that Mr. Glassman supports. In fact, it was another $1.1 trillion debt on our children and grandchildren. And they said when they passed the stimulus package that the unemployment would be 8%. Have you checked lately? And the fact is that we need to stop spending. We need to have the stimulus package be brought, the money that's left in the stimulus package returned back to the taxpayers, keep taxes low. To raise taxes on anybody in America today with the tough economic times we're in is foolishness. It will harm our ability to recover our economy in Arizona and in this nation. We can recover, we will recover, but the Obama policies have put us further in the ditch, whether it be the stimulus package, whether it be Obamacare, which is going to lay another huge burden on families in America, or whether it be in the other spending proposals that this administration has. They have mortgaged our children's futures. They have committed generational theft, and it's got to stop.
Senator McCain, thank you. Mr. Glassman.
Frank, when it comes to the issue of taxes, I agree with John McCain that right now is not the time to be increasing taxes on the working families of Arizona. Yet in the past 7 days, we as Arizonans have watched our U.S. Senator fight to keep gays out of the military, fight against a piece of legislation that he co-sponsored, the DREAM Act. Twice he co-sponsored that legislation. He's been fighting to keep kids from being able to go to school. My question to John McCain is, what is your plan for getting Arizonans back to work? Because cutting taxes for large corporations isn't the answer for the working families of Arizona. And that's what we like to see. It's time to turn the page. It's time someone with ideas for Arizona.
Mr. Jocelyn.
Here's the basic problem as I see it. You know, both Republicans and Democrats always speak in vague generalities. Neither of them really have a new plan, even though we're in the worst financial situation since the Great Depression. And the reason for that is There are 35,000 registered lobbyists in Washington. There are 535 members of Congress, and there's a tax code. And every member of Congress spends half their time raising money for campaigns, and they deal with the special interests in order to raise that money. Politics has become about big money. It hasn't become about big ideas and ideas to solve our problems. I'm a Green Party candidate. We never take money from corporate PACs or big labor, and I never will.
Mr. Nolan.
Yes, I think it's important to realize that the huge run-up in spending and deficits did not start when President Obama was sworn into office in January of last year. The budget was in balance or very close to balance at the end of the Clinton administration. The big run-up in spending, the big run-up in deficits began in the Bush presidency. And this is a bipartisan problem that Democrats and Republicans have, between them, foisted on America. Spending money we don't have, trying to kick the can down the road, pass the burden on, as Senator McCain said, to future generations. If we want to end the problems of runaway spending and end the deficits and reduce the debt, we have to think outside the two-party box. I agree with Jerry Jocelyn on that. I would, of course, suggest that the Libertarian Party is the appropriate party.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Senator McCain.
Well, I'm proud to have been endorsed by the Citizens Against Government Waste, the National Taxpayers Union, the American for Taxpayers Reform, because I was there fighting against my own party and against my own president, against the earmarked pork barrel spending, against this out-of-control spending, Medicare Part D that was $1 trillion debt on future generations of Americans. I'm proud of my record of fiscal responsibility, and I'll stick to it, and we'll stop this spending, and we'll stop mortgaging our children's futures. And one of the ways to do it for small businesses is to declare a payroll tax holiday and pay for it with the stimulus money for small businesses.
Senator, thank you. Your time is up. The next question for Mr. Jocelyn will stay on the economy. You say your flat tax proposal will reduce unemployment by 20 to 30%. Now, logically, that means it'll create jobs. Now, what kind of jobs do you see being created? And are they the type of jobs that will sustain economic growth here in Arizona?
I'm not targeting jobs with the flat tax, but I'm targeting the payroll tax. Like Mr. McCain, the only difference is that he'll have a one-year payroll tax holiday that I assume he'll pay for by borrowing money from China again. According to David Fromm, that would cost $40 billion per month, or $500 billion for his holiday. I would eliminate the payroll tax altogether. By eliminating the payroll tax, you lower the cost of jobs by 15%. Jobs are like anything else. When you lower the price of something, you sell more. So that will create jobs by making it easier for employers to decide to hire people rather than spend the money on other things. Another big area, of course, is healthcare, and I want to get that off the backs of employers too. I've been a small businessman. You know, I've seen this when businesses are just getting started and you're trying to get the thing going. You not only have to pay for the employee, you have to pay for their health care, and you have to pay for the payroll tax. Half the jobs in America are created by entrepreneurs starting new businesses. We've got to make it as easy for them as possible, and unfortunately, it's getting harder and harder. So that's 50% of the jobs. If we can do that by eliminating the payroll tax, we can get more people hired at all levels. It won't necessarily be any one level, and it'll get the economy growing again, both by the money that they're going to be spending because they have jobs now, and also because of the new hiring and so forth. We can get this, we've got to get the economy growing again, and it'll have a stimulative effect permanently, not just for a year.
Okay, Mr. Jocelyn, thank you very much. Mr. Nolan.
Yes, libertarians believe that you have a right to keep what you earn, every penny of it. It is wrong, therefore, for the government at any level to steal your money through taxation. Taxes on individual income should be eliminated as fast as possible and as completely as possible. This would be the greatest single stimulus that we could offer to the American people and to grow our economy. We're way in debt. We're almost up to, our national debt is almost 100% of our gross national product. We're in deep trouble, folks, and unless we turn things around, we're going to be in deeper trouble. Republicans and Democrats talk a good game before the election, but they never deliver. The budget keeps going up and up and up, regardless of who's in the White House and who controls Congress. We do need change.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Senator McCain.
Well, I want to go back again to the absolute urgency to extend the existing tax cuts. If we don't, we will see an increase in the estate tax to 55%. We will be taxing 50% of small business income. We need to have a payroll tax holiday, and I would pay for it with the unused stimulus money so that small business people in Arizona can hire, can buy equipment, and grow our economy. We also need to have provisions for people to stay in their homes.
Mr. Glassman.
We're 4 days away from October 1st, and now we're hearing our senator talk about the tax cuts that expire December 31st. We all know the timing is not correct because this is something that should have been planned ahead. But in answer to your question, Frank, we need green jobs. We want to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. We need to reduce the number of senators that we have who are dependent on fossil fuel contributions. Green jobs are Arizona's future with over 340 days of sunlight, great universities. China's not waiting. Germany's not waiting. We shouldn't be waiting. We need our federal government to be investing resources in developing solar industries right here in Arizona because those are the kinds of jobs that are going to be strong and are going to lead us into the future. And that's what we need from our U.S. Senator, someone who's looking towards the future.
Mr. Jocelyn, you get the last word on this.
Yeah, Senator McCain mentioned the expiration of the people that are making over $250,000 a year, the tax cut. I read The Economist every week, and The Economist called that plan trivial. It's trivial for both Republicans and Democrats, but it's the kind of thing Republicans and Democrats always argue about. $39 million against a deficit of over $1 trillion. It's not going to matter. We need big answers. We've got ourselves into a big problem, and the Republicans and Democrats pick these little issues and fight over them in gridlock and never settle anything.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Mr. Nolan, you have advocated ending entitlement programs. Does that include Social Security and Medicare? If so, what do you tell people who rely on those programs?
Well, as one of those people myself, I certainly don't want to get rid of them overnight. People have been forced by their government to pay into these programs for many, many years. And like any Ponzi scheme, the people who got in early did real well. The people who are getting in now are going to do real badly. What I have advocated is a phase out whereby we raise the age of eligibility by 2 months per year. If we'd done that since the beginning of the Social Security program, there would not be a crisis in Social Security because the life expectancy of people reaching retirement age would be about what it was in the 1930s. When it was 3 years, it's now up to 18 years. We need to increase the retirement age. We need to give young people the opportunity to opt out, forfeiting whatever they've been forced to pay in, but the opportunity to opt out and invest their money privately if they so choose. And finally, we need to give people in those programs the opportunity to stay in but divert part of their Social Security payment into some kind of voluntary retirement plan, an IRA, a KEO, something of that nature.
Okay, Senator McCain.
Well, there are two major entitlement programs, as you know, both Social Security and Medicare. And the Democrats are dragging out the old Republicans want to do away with Social Security pinata. It's not going to work. But you know what we just did with Obamacare, my friends? We just cut $500 billion out of Medicare. There are 330,000 Arizonans who are enrolled in Medicare who have a program called Medicare Advantage, where they have choices to make. And guess what? They're going to eliminate, for 330,000 citizens of this great state of Arizona, their ability to have the Medicare program of their choice. We're going to repeal and replace Obamacare, and we are going to do it as one of our first agenda items beginning next January.
Senator, thank you very much. Mr. Glassman.
Frank, there's a special irony in hearing a man who's been on government health care from the day he was born throughout his entire life talking about how bad health care reform is. The fact is that Social Security, going back to the question, is a promise. We've paid into it, and while some may not be reliant on that Social Security for their golden years, many in Arizona are. And I believe that as Arizona's next U.S. Senator, part of my job is going to be making sure that we prioritize as a country, prioritize in our investments, and make sure that we, as a federal government, keep our promises to those who have paid into the system.
Mr. Jocelyn.
Social Security and Medicare are a special issue for the Green Party. We've been looking at it as it came up to an anniversary lately. The Deficit Commission in Washington, President Obama's Deficit Commission, is supposed to be bipartisan. Both the Republican head of that and the Democratic head of that say that Social Security and Medicare aren't off the table. We know code that is, they're both going to take a look at it. The fact is that Social Security is fully funded through 2035. Medicare is going to go up, but under my flat tax system, it'll fully fund both Medicare and Social Security. And in Washington, I'll fight forever to save Medicare and Social Security. The recent plan that we had to save Social Security failed.
Okay, Mr. Jocelyn, thank you very much. Mr. Nolan.
Yes, I find it somewhat ironic, again, with Senator McCain. He voted, if I'm not mistaken, for Medicare Part D, the newest and most expensive portion of the Medicare plan. The government should not be in the business of providing medical care for its citizens. To the extent that it chooses to involve itself, we need to make the choices as wide as possible, and I agree with Senator McCain that the Medicare Advantage program is a good one and should be kept as long as we have Medicare. But the simple reality is, once again, Republicans and Democrats jawbone a lot, but always vote for the new program and the higher taxes.
Time is up, sir. Thank you very much. Next question for Mr. Glassman. By most accounts, immigration reform will not happen until next year at the earliest, but there are some actions that could be taken at the border to secure the border, such as Homeland Security, for instance, assigning more personnel. That could make it happen much more quickly than next year. What is your plan to secure the border and ensure that violence fueled by the drug cartels will not filter into Arizona?
We need to make sure that we bring the appropriate resources to the border. And that doesn't mean just buying billboards that say securing the border. That means actually hiring and training the appropriate number of Border Patrol agents, hiring and training the appropriate number of customs agents, and also bringing technology to the border through the form of unmanned aerial vehicles. Those mean jobs for Arizona because that's where many unmanned aerial vehicle companies are operating. But securing the border isn't enough. We also have to have a way for people to come here legally, pay taxes, and work. There's a piece of legislation already in D.C. called the Ag Jobs Bill. It was written by both the American Farm Bureau Federation and the United Farm Workers, the kind of bipartisan legislation that our former U.S. Senator John McCain in his former life used to actually support. And that's the kind of legislation that should be moving forward to make sure that our economy can function, that people can come here legally, so we can separate those who are coming with ill purposes for those who are coming to work. Additionally, we need to have a pathway for the 11 to 12 million people that are already here, some of whom are already going through the process. I do not support amnesty, and we should not reward those who have come here illegally. At the same time, they should be required to go through background checks, pay back taxes, pay a fine, learn English, and then have a system that they can go through as well at the end of the line, not getting in front of those who are trying to come here legally. It's about having someone that's going to work with everyone to find solutions, not just serve as a partisan battering ram trying to accomplish nothing except self-aggrandizement and furthering their political future.
Your time is up, sir. Thank you very much. Mr. Jocelyn.
Here's my immigration plan. People, I believe 99% of the people coming here illegally are coming here for work. They're not coming here to crash into us on the freeway like some have suggested. I would change the major cost center that is immigration now into a revenue source. And I would do that by regulating, registering, and taxing the 400,000 illegal workers that are here now. I'd raise their wage to $10 an hour so American workers would be more competitive with them. And then also I would tax at 16%. That would raise $1.25 billion. If we spent $500 million on the program, we would still have $750 million left over for the state of Arizona, which Arizona can sorely use.
Mr. Nolan.
I believe the original question was how we would keep violence from spilling across the border from Mexico to the United States. Most of that violence originates with the Central American and Mexican drug cartels. They are able to maintain a multi-billion-dollar empire simply because drugs have been made illegal. This should end. The so-called war on drugs is in actuality a war on people who choose to use some drugs, and the blowback on it around the world has been terrible. We were funding the Taliban as part of our efforts to eradicate poppy fields in Afghanistan, and they were the people who trained the terrorists that attacked this country. We must simply end the war on drugs, treat drug use as a medical and social problem, stop making it a criminal penalty, and take away the source of revenue from the criminal gangs who are currently invading.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nolan. Senator McCain.
Well, this is, as I said earlier, a national security issue, but it's also a human rights issue. They found over 2,000 bodies in the desert outside Tucson in the last 10 years. The bodies found in the desert now this year are nearing an all-time high. The 10th mayor in Mexico was just assassinated. The brutality and the human rights abuses are beyond horrendous. And so we need to get our border secure. John Kyle and I have a 10-point plan. Among those are Operation Stone Garden, which puts people in incarceration for a period of time if they're repeat crossers. It is a national security issue. 17%, according to Sheriff Larry Deaver of Cochise County, of those who cross our border have committed crimes previously in this country. That's not acceptable.
Okay, Senator, thank you very much. Mr. Glassman, your final word.
Thank you. We need to secure our border. We need federal immigration reform, and that needs to be led by our next United States Senator. Arizonans know the definition of insanity. It's doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. John McCain's been in Washington, D.C. for 3 decades. It's time to turn the page. It's time to send someone new to Washington, someone who's actually committed to getting things done, moving federal immigration forward, and that's by working with everyone to find actual solutions.
Okay, Senator, you did mention about the fact that we do have a national security problem on the border. And so far we have been trying to deal, it appears, with the problem. We're trying to treat it as a criminal matter. At this time, because of the violence and because of seemingly Mexico's inability to really control the cartels, should we begin to look at this problem as a diplomatic problem and try to bring in our foreign policy? Should we change our foreign policy toward Mexico?
Well, I think we obviously need to work as closely as we can with Mexico. There's a Plan Merida that we have spent hundreds of millions of dollars in trying to help the Mexican government and police and law enforcement agencies to improve. The only organization now in Mexico that you can to some degree rely on is the Mexican Army, because the police and others have been corrupted. This is a very, very serious problem. And we now have people crossing our border who are not just from Mexico or from our hemisphere. They're from all over the world. And I believe that with a 10-point plan, with surveillance, with personnel, and with completion of the fence, we can secure our borders. And we have made progress in San Diego, in some other places. We have made progress in Yuma. We need to do the same thing in Tucson. When you still have 241,000 people cross our Tucson border illegally in the last year, when you have intercept over 1 million pounds of marijuana, talk to our law enforcement people on the border. They'll tell you that it's a national security issue. And we can, working with the Mexican government, help them become more effective. But it is a very, very serious issue, and one that deserves the provision of our assets and our efforts and a strategy that will work with Mexico, but will also get our border secured. High walls and high walls and open fences.
Okay, Senator McCain, thank you very much. Mr. Glassman.
Buzzwords: high walls, open fences. How about progress? How about results? Nogales needs to be secured. I was the former vice mayor and on the Tucson City Council. I understand that we need more resources for our public safety system, and that's why I'm proud to have the endorsements of both Pima County Sheriff Clarence Dupnick from Pima County, as well as Tony Estrada, the sheriff from Santa Cruz County. Those elected officials understand that we need a champion for bringing resources home. You know, Frank, you mentioned diplomacy. Before we can reach out to the government of Mexico, we need to have a U.S. Senator from Arizona that treats the Homeland Security people respectfully. And I just have another image in my head of our short-tempered U.S. Senator being rude to Janet Napolitano just the other day. We need someone to work with people. That's what this campaign's about.
That time is up. Thank you very much. Mr. Jocelyn.
Again, illegal immigration is about jobs here. That's the last line of defense, is the job site. You know, all this talk about doing this and doing that and putting more troops here and putting video cameras there, it happens at the job site. That's why the people are coming here, for jobs. And to be in the U.S. Senate for 24 years with a border state with this giant problem that we have, and to come back here and say we're mad at the federal government because they haven't done anything is absurd. We've got to do something at the job site. We've got to regulate. We've got to give them biometric IDs, and we've got to tax them so we can raise revenue for Arizona. We've got to turn a negative into a positive. And we can do it with a rational immigration policy, and I have an immigration policy. Others don't.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. David Nolan.
I'll say it again. If we want to end the violence on the border, we must end the so-called war on drugs. It didn't, prohibition didn't work in the 1920s when the distribution of alcohol was turned over to Al Capone and other criminals, and it's not working now. We have more Americans in jail per capita than any other major industrialized nation in the world, and most of them are there for trivial violations of drug laws. People are being thrown in jail for 20 years simply for smoking a marijuana cigarette. That's morally wrong, it's counterproductive, and it's extremely expensive. As far as building a wall, I will say once again, the last thing we need is a $6 billion or $12 billion wall across the southern United States that is grossly expensive and will someday be used to keep Americans inside if things continue to go bad.
Time is up. Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Senator McCain.
Well, let me say again, we need to secure our borders. Then we can move on to all the other issues, including ag jobs and a legal temporary worker program and other provisions which can resolve this issue. If we don't secure the borders first, we will find ourselves with another group of people who have come to this country illegally, and then we will have to deal with it over again. There seems to be the belief that we are unable to secure our borders. We are certainly able to do so. Other countries do, and it's our responsibility to all of our citizens.
Okay, thank you, Senator McCain. Next question for Mr. Jocelyn. You have stated that the VA model could reduce the cost of health care while at the same time provide better service. Now, given the recent scandals and continued complaints about the VA, how can you convince the American public that the government can run a well-managed, efficient, and safe health care system?
Well, I don't think, there are complaints about all different brands of health care, and certainly national health care is one, but everybody I've talked to, Vietnam veterans and others who are using the VA on a regular basis, have nothing but good things to say about it. The VA has really changed. The technicians and the doctors at the VA developed their own in-house software system called Vista. And what they did is they actually developed it incognito, as it were, away from all the brass, and used personal computers to record everything, record what people were taking, and it's now the most efficient system here. We pay twice as much in the United States than other advanced countries. We pay an average of $7,200 a year for our health care. Other countries pay $3,500. The VA, with their advanced system, could expand and take care of people that don't now have health care, and also for Medicaid people. So we could both expand coverage and lower the cost of health care, and that's really the key. We can't be competitive with other countries if we're spending twice as much on health care. That's 17% of our economy, soon to go to 20%. It's just another drag on the economy. I've been a businessman and an economist, and I always look at productivity, basically what you spend and what you get. And under my flat tax program, we can afford to have a system whereby people that don't now have health care could be served with an expanded VA, and other people could get a voucher to pay for their own health care. And that would take the burden of health care both off the employer, but also off the states.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Nolan.
Yes, once again, I find it interesting that the Greens and the Democrats believe that the solution to virtually every problem is a big, new government program, and that's exactly what we don't need. We've already got a huge deficit. Think about your experiences when you go down to the DMV or standing in line at the post office. Is that the kind of health care that you want? People come to this country from Canada, from Great Britain, and from all over the world because it takes 6 months, a year, or longer to get what is readily available within weeks in the United States. Nationalized health care, taxpayer-financed health care is a bad plan. Anytime the government gets involved, whether it's education or the big dig in Boston, you can count on two things. It will cost a lot more than it's initially estimated, and it will take a lot longer to complete. We do not need a government health care program.
Thank you. Senator McCain.
I'm proud of our thousands and thousands of people all over the country who care for our veterans, and I'm proud of our VA system. I'm proud that my office has handled thousands of cases of veterans, whether it be the World War II veteran who didn't get his medals, or the veteran of Afghanistan who needs the kind of help that is necessary to come all the way back to our society. There are two very serious issues remaining, though. One is PTSD, and the other is the number of suicides that are taking place in our armed forces amongst our governors. We've got to devote a lot more time and energy to those two issues. I'm proud of the VA, but they'll be the first one to tell you there's a lot we don't know, and we've got a lot of work to do.
Senator, thank you. Mr. Glassman.
With all due respect, and Sir John McCain, I respect your service to our country, but this campaign isn't about his service to our country in the military. This is about his service to the residents of Arizona. We have over 500,000 military families right here in Arizona. I'm proud that my family is one of them. And as you heard from his very own words, it's about investing time and thought. But what about resources? What about resources for our VA facilities right here in Arizona? We have over 10,000 veterans on the Navajo Nation that have to drive between 5 to 7 hours simply to visit a clinic because we do not have one on the Navajo Nation. Veterans, I ask you, do you have an advocate on bringing resources home? Do you have an advocate when we have a U.S. Senator who voted against the GI Bill? We can do better.
Time is up. Mr. Glassman, thank you very much. Mr. Jocelyn.
When I got into this, I really got interested in the VA and their system and their software system and how they've been able to become so efficient. And there's really a lot more than I can do in 30 seconds. So if you would go to jocelynforsenate.com, click on the best healthcare. That'll explain a lot more. In fact, there's like a 2-hour video there that goes over it. But other countries, I heard my friend David mention Canada. They come down here for healthcare. 80% of the people in Canada support their healthcare system. The great majority of people in the United Kingdom support Britain's healthcare system. This thing that we have the worst healthcare is wrong.
Okay, Mr. Jocelyn, thank you very much. Round 3 of questioning now. We go back to Mr. Nolan. You have advocated cutting the size of the federal government by 50%. So specifically, which programs do you cut out? Which programs do you keep?
Good question. As I said earlier, we need to have a plan in place and start implementing it immediately to reduce and eventually privatize, voluntarize our entitlement programs. Something like 40%, 41% of our federal spending is on entitlement programs, Social Security, Medicare, and a few other minor ones. We need to cut military spending. We need a strong defense for the United States of America, but we do not need to be involved in unconstitutional, undeclared wars around the world. We got into Iraq because we were fed faulty data, or our president chose to believe faulty data. There were no weapons of mass destruction. And as far as Afghanistan, we were funding the Taliban before the 9/11 attacks. We need to adopt the Jeffersonian policy of honest friendship and commerce with all, entangling alliances with none. We can cut military spending. We can defer and eventually eliminate most of the entitlement programs. We can reduce interest payments, and as it is, we're going to be spending more and more on interest because we're borrowing more and more. We can make cuts across the board.
Okay, thank you, sir. Senator McCain.
I agree. We can cut right across the board, and we can cut the size of the budget of Congress to start with. I just have to go back a second. I won't pay a lot of attention to some of the things that Mr. Glassman said, but I'm proud of my service to our veterans. I received the highest award of every veterans organization in America, literally. I'm proud of my service to our veterans. But first of all, we could eliminate and give back to the taxpayers the stimulus package. That's hundreds of billions of dollars that still remain unspent, which Mr. Glassman supports. In fact, he supports a second stimulus. So we need to have a budget that goes back to 2008 spending, and that would eliminate some of the billions and billions of dollars that are necessary. We need to eliminate the earmarked pork barrel spending, which means corruption in Washington.
Okay, Senator McCain, your time is up. Thank you, sir. Mr. Glassman.
The working families of Arizona, when times get tough, we prioritize. And that's what we need to be doing in Washington, D.C. If we're talking about things to eliminate, we could eliminate the giant tax cuts and credits that are afforded by the United States Senate and Congress to big oil companies. If we truly want to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, let's strategically invest in those areas as well. When John McCain talks about pork barrel spending, I know it's a phrase that has gotten him pretty far, but the fact is the projects that John McCain refuses to champion are the water reclamation facility in Avondale, the grade separated interchange in the city of Maricopa, infrastructure projects that would get Arizonans working and would stimulate our economy, therefore generating more tax dollars. That's what we need, a strategic investment and a cut on those big oil subsidies.
Time is up. Mr. Glassman and Mr. Jocelyn.
I think a great number of people here haven't been mentioned, and that's America's middle class. You don't have to be a fan of Lou Dobbs or Arianna Huffington to know that basically those of us in the middle class have been getting the shaft for the last 30 years. Everything we spend money on is getting more expensive. Our taxes have gone up, and things are getting tougher. And Republicans and Democrats are both the cause. They're not the solution. That's why I started getting interested in this. You know, when the stock market crashed 2 years ago and I saw my life savings going down the drain, I started studying the economy, and that's how I came up with a flat tax that will put more money on the in the hands of the working class and the middle class, get the economy stimulated again so we can grow our way out of our problems.
Okay, sir, thank you very much. Mr. Nolan.
Yeah, I have to be bemused by Rodney Glassman's idea that we can, quote, use the unspent stimulus money. There is no unspent stimulus money. There is no stimulus money at all. It's all funny money that was created out of thin air by the Federal Reserve System and lent to big banks so they could repair their balance sheets. The idea that there's this huge pile of hundreds of billions of dollars just sitting around and that they should be lent out or used for taxpayer relief. We have to end these so-called stimulus programs, which are simply bailouts for big banks and politically connected corporations.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. The next question for Mr. Glassman. How does your experience as Vice Mayor of Tucson prepare you to be Arizona's next U.S. Senator, especially with all the tough economic problems and the difficulties we have with international terrorism?
Well, Frank, I'm excited about working for Arizona and working for Arizonans. And my experience as a local elected official is the exact kind of experience that every United States Senator should have. Being able to return phone calls, being able to return emails, caring enough to talk to my fellow colleagues in a respectful way, and working towards solutions. When I ran for the Tucson City Council, I wasn't just endorsed by the Sierra Club and the labor unions and Planned Parenthood. I was also endorsed by the Tucson Association of Realtors and the Southern Arizona Home Builders. And once elected, we worked on legislation on ordinances that were first of their kind in the country but important to our community. Rainwater harvesting on all new commercial development, gray water plumbing on all new homes, because water is a key issue for our state. And I do have a PhD in arid land resource sciences, but more importantly, I have a track record of building consensus, bringing people together to work together, environmentalists and business people. If I can do that at the local level, I'll be able to do that in Washington, D.C. I don't care whether people are members of the Tea Party or the Coffee Klatch. Whether an idea is for Republicans or Democrats, what matters most to me is that the idea is a good idea for Arizona, and I have a track record of working in a bipartisan fashion. It's about being responsive, it's about caring about my constituents, and it's about working for the future of our community. I'm running for the United States Senate because I'm concerned about the future of Arizona and our nation, and I want to make Arizona the greatest place to live, to work, and to raise a family, and we have to do that by building consensus, and that's the track record that I have at the local level.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Jocelyn.
My campaign is really all about productivity. I've been a small businessman. I've owned my own businesses. I've started several businesses. I tend to look at things differently, certainly, than career politicians, whether they're starting their career or near the end of their career. I look at things based on what they cost and what we get out of them. It's called productivity. And if there's anything the government needs right now, it's somebody that's looking at the productivity of our military, the productivity of our healthcare system, and the productivity of our tax system. The tax system is probably at the center of it because everybody talks about spending, but nobody really concentrates that much on how we raise the money and where it comes from and how that affects the economy. So that's how I got into it. I believe it's about productivity and making America work more efficiently and better so we can grow again in the 21st century.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Nolan.
Yes, I'm sure Rodney Glassman is a very nice person. I only met him for the first time a few minutes ago. But if you listen carefully to what he says, it's all glittering generalities and buzzwords, work together, cooperation, blah, 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 blah. Very little in the way of specifics. The hard fact is Rodney Glassman is a Democrat. The Democratic Party has just pushed through some of the largest, new, expensive programs in the history of the United States, and if he's sent to the Senate, Rodney Glassman will vote to keep those programs in place. He will not vote to cut spending. John McCain is an honorable man, but he hasn't done much to contain spending either, and if we send a Republican or a Democrat back to Congress in January, you're going to see more of the same. We need to break the mold. We need to think outside the box. As a libertarian, I will do that.
Sir, your time is up. Thank you very much. Senator McCain.
Well, thank you. I also note that during his very short tenure as vice mayor that Mr. Glassman voted to raise taxes and fees on the people of Tucson. Over 30 mayors, including the mayor of Tucson, have supported me and have endorsed me, along with our firefighters and our police and our city councils and our county supervisors. Why? Because I've been working with them for Arizona. Arizona is in really tough times. They are really tough. And we've got to keep people in their homes, and we've got to get small businesses the credit and the ways to hire and to expand their businesses. That's the way out of this mess. And by the way, Mr. Glassman's first vote as a United States Senate, which won't happen, would be to vote for Harry Reid as the Majority Leader of the United States Senate.
Senator McCain.
I won't do that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Glassman.
Well, and I appreciate the studying that John McCain's done on my voting record. It's hard to do with John McCain because in the past 10 years, he has the worst attendance record of anyone in the U.S. Senate because he was not busy representing us. Rather, he was busy promoting himself. I have ideas. I'm excited about working for Arizona. And you know what? I'm not running for Barack Obama or against John McCain. I'm running for all of us. We need a U.S. Senator focused on jobs, focused on education, who's focused on the future of our state and the future of our nation. And that's why I ask people to visit my website at rodneyglassman.com to learn more.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. McCain. Arizona Senator Carl Hayden left behind as his legacy the Central Arizona Project, which to this day still gives life to Arizona. Senator Ernest McFarland gave the country the GI Bill. What, Senator McCain, do you feel is your legislative legacy, considering that Arizona has returned you to the Congress now for 28 straight years?
Well, I would hope that in keeping with those individuals you just mentioned and others, like John Rhodes, who I succeeded in the House, and others, would be a reputation for honesty and integrity and straight talk. And perhaps making a significant contribution to keeping our nation safe. Arizona is a place full of our bases, full of our men and women who are serving, our National Guard, and we are a vital part of our nation's defense. I've been there in conflicts with presidents and sometimes against my own president. I believe that I've been right. I was right on the surge, and I'm right on Afghanistan. And I'll put my support for the men and women who are serving as an area that I would like to have a legacy. And I'd also like to include in that I've been involved in many issues and much legislation that keeps the beautiful, pristine beauty of our great state preserved for hundreds of years to come, whether it be being called the Grand Canyon's best friend or being involved in water rights issues, Native American water rights issues with John Kyle, or a wilderness bill that keeps 3.5 acres of Arizona in pristine preservation. So I hope honesty, integrity, a person who contributed to our nation's security and that of the men and women who are serving, and my dedication to keeping Arizona the most beautiful nation on earth.
Okay, Senator McCain, thank you very much. Mr. Glassman.
Frank, we've had John McCain back in Washington, D.C. now for 3 decades, and we have quite a bit to show for it already. We live in a state with one of the worst classroom teacher-student ratios in the country. We live in a state where more than 50% of our homeowners are upside down on their mortgages. And while he talks about straight talk and even had a bus named after it, he was for immigration reform before he was against it. He was for repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell before he was against it. He was against the Bush tax cuts, which now he's for. And when it comes to conservation areas, I get dozens and dozens of calls from Arizonans across the state because John McCain's idea for the Grand Canyon is a uranium mine on the northern rim. The fact is that it's time to turn the page. It's time for someone new. It's time for someone that actually wants to work for Arizona and make Arizona a better place. And that's why I'm asking for people's vote on November 2nd.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jocelyn.
What do I think of when I think of John McCain? I think of a lot of things. Naturally, I think of his service, but I think of him as probably the most pro-war senator that we've had in a long time. And we've been involved in several wars, of course, in the Middle East. All of them have idealistic names like enduring freedom and never-ending justice and such. But we all know what the root cause of these wars is. It's our addiction to foreign oil. That's why I'm supporting a proposal by Microsoft's Bill Gates to spend just 1/20th of what we're spending on foreign oil to develop clean energy alternatives. We've got to approach alternative energy as if it was a matter of national security, because it is.
Mr. Nolan.
Senator McCain does indeed have a distinguished legacy, particularly in years gone by. But look back and you'll see bills with names like McCain-Feingold, McCain-Lieberman, McCain-Kennedy. Let's face it, John McCain is no consistent defender of our liberties. And one of the reasons I got into this race is that right now, at this very moment, Senator McCain is a sponsor, I think the lead sponsor of Senate Bill 3081, that's 3081, a bill which would authorize the arrest and indefinite detention of American citizens without trial and without recourse. This is one of the most dangerous, evil, un-American bills that's ever been proposed in Congress, and nobody who would sponsor such a bill should be sitting in a seat in the United States Senate.
Okay, time is up. Senator McCain.
Well, again, hope that our viewers won't judge me by the remarks just made. They may be a bit biased. I'd like for you to ask your local mayor, city council member, county supervisor, the local police and fire people who I've worked with closely to make sure that we keep our state safe, that we get as much as possible help we can to our citizens, and that is from a long and close relationship with our elected officials, our county supervisors, and I'm proud of my relationship with them.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. The last question of this debate will be for Mr. Joslin. In your campaign literature, you appear to be advocating a policy of winning the hearts and minds of the Afghan people. Is that as important to you as conducting military operations, specifically because how do you win the hearts and minds of a people in a country where radical Islam has seemingly won sanctuary?
Yeah, the radical Islam, by the way, is coming out of madrasas that were paid for with Saudi oil money. There are two books I think people ought to read to understand where I'm coming from on our Afghanistan policy. One is Charlie Wilson's War, and the other is 3 Cups of Tea. 3 Cups of Tea is about building schools in Western Pakistan and Afghanistan. You know, a big problem with our strategy, our military strategy, isn't that our military is necessarily too big, it's that our military doesn't fit the mission. You know, when we first went into Afghanistan, the mission seemed to be to bomb them back to the Stone Age. Unfortunately, they were already living in the Stone Age. In order to win their hearts and minds, in order to work on a ground level, we need to spend a long time, but not spend as much money. It's a difficult thing to do, and it's a difficult thing for the military to convert from a program which now we're spending $100 billion this year in Afghanistan. There are an estimated 50 to 100 al-Qaeda fighters there. We're spending between $1 and $2 billion per al-Qaeda fighter per year just to fight them, not necessarily to take them out or capture them. I don't believe it's going to work, in part because the Afghan army is so dysfunctional. We've been training them now for 9 years. 90% of them are illiterate. The desertion rate is through the roof. They're not going to be able to hold on to the territory we take there. We need a new strategy in Afghanistan. I don't believe in pulling out completely, but we need a new strategy.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Mr. Nolan.
Yes, I am reminded of the little quip that was going around shortly after we began the war in Afghanistan, which went to the effect of 15 Saudis attacked the United States with airplanes and kill thousands of innocent Americans. What do? Invade Afghanistan. Folks, that doesn't compute. We should not be there. We should never have gone there. We should bring all of our troops home as we can, soon as we can, as long as it does not endanger their safety. A century ago, a man named Randolph Bourne said, "War is the health of the state," by which he meant war is the single biggest enterprise by which government expands its power and scope. If you want a small, limited constitutional government, you cannot simultaneously wage wars around the world.
Thank you, sir. Senator McCain.
We cannot allow Afghanistan to return to being a base for attacks on the United States and our allies. We can't forget what happened that caused 9/11. By the way, I recommend a book called Ghost Wars by a guy named Stephen Cole to understand Afghanistan very well. We have the finest military in the history of our country. Retention and recruitment is all-time high. General David Petraeus is one of the finest generals that America has ever produced, as all those who are under him. I'm so proud of the job that the Arizona National Guard is doing, and I'm proud of the work that I did on their behalf over a many-year period. But the biggest problem today is the president announcing that we're going to leave the middle of 2011. You cannot tell the enemy that you're leaving and expect to succeed. So I hope that the president would say our withdrawal will be conditions-based and we will do what's necessary to win.
Senator, thank you very much. I'm sorry your time is up. Mr. Glassman.
Frank, by the same time we shouldn't be telling our enemies when we're leaving, we also can't have our enemies knowing that every single time there's a problem, we're going to be rushing in. And one of my former colleagues said it best, John McCain's never met a surge that he didn't like. Now the fact is, my #1 priority as Arizona's U.S. Senator is not going to be winning the hearts and minds of the Afghanis. It's going to be investing in Arizona's future and our nation's future. When I use the term nation building as Arizona's Senator, I'm going to be talking about building our schools, our infrastructure, bringing our tax dollars home, and making Arizona the priority. That's what we need from our United States Senator. It's about jobs and education for us. And that's the priority that our U.S. Senator needs to have, and that's what I plan on taking to Washington, D.C.
Mr. Glassman.
Arizonans, It's time to turn the page. We all know the definition of insanity. It's doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Well, this year we have a choice. We have a choice in Rodney Glassman. My wife and I are having a baby girl this November. We will be and are living, working, and raising a family right here in Arizona. It's time to have a U.S. Senator focused on jobs and education. Since the beginning of the recession, we've lost over 300,000 jobs. We have one of the worst classroom teacher-student ratios in the country. We have decaying infrastructure, and we need a U.S. Senator who's focused on Arizona. I have ideas. We need to be making the research and development tax credit permanent. We need to be focusing on green jobs for Arizona, the kinds of jobs that are going to create thousands of working families, getting them to be able to save their homes. That's what we need right now. Germany's not waiting. China's not waiting. We have spectacular research institutions, and we need to have a senator championing reducing our dependence on fossil fuels. We need to have a U.S. senator that's going to support our veterans, not just based on service from 30 years ago, but also a U.S. senator who wants to be working for the future, for our families, and that's what our campaign's about. Now, this is a 6-year term, and so I asked Senator McCain, I asked John McCain, sir, please continue to have town halls with us. It's disrespectful to both the voters of Arizona and myself for you to give 60 minutes for a term that's going to be 6 years, which is going to put you in your 4th decade in Washington, D.C. Will you continue having town halls with me?
Mr. Glassman, thank you very much. Your time is up. Senator McCain.
Well, as Mr. Glassman just said, this election is really a choice. You have a choice between my efforts to repeal Obamacare, to stop the earmarking and pork barrel spending, leading the fight against the stimulus package on the floor of the Senate, or Mr. Glassman, who wants another stimulus package and supports this waste of over $1 trillion, supports Obamacare that 60% of the American people want to do away with, supports the corruptive practice of earmarks, and even opposes SB 1070 that some 70 to 80% of the people of Arizona support. He's clearly out of step with Arizona and the majority of the people of our state. I'm proud of my record. I'm proud of protecting our bases. I'm proud of the fact that the F-35 is coming to Luke Air Force Base in Yuma. I'm proud of the fact that I've been involved in numerous environmental and legislation which protects the pristine beauty of Arizona. I'm proud of my service and support from every veteran organization across America and across our state. I've had hundreds of town hall meetings. I've listened to the people. And I know that they know that we can come out of this mess we're in by stopping spending, by getting our fiscal house in order, and by restoring America's greatness. And Arizona's best days are ahead of us. I thank you for allowing me to serve. I appreciate your support, and I ask for your vote.
Okay, thank you, Senator McCain. Mr. Jocelyn, you get the last word.
I hope I made a connection tonight with Republicans, Democrats, and independents who want real solutions to the worst economy since the Great Depression. I knew the odds were long getting into this campaign, but I believed it would come down to this: a campaign of big ideas versus a campaign of big special interest money. Well, I've been encouraged going out and meeting Arizonans, from Tea Partiers to progressives to everybody that wants to restore America's middle class. And I've been encouraged by what's been happening across the United States. We've seen several new candidates, that's people running for office for the first time, defeat career politicians. A poll recently in the Gallup poll said that 58% of Americans wanted to vote for a third party. So I believe that I can actually win this campaign. And to do it, I want everybody that believes it's what I said or has liked what I said to go to my website, jocelynforsenate.com, and print out some car window signs. Cut them out, put them on the back of your car. A big Jocelyn there, Arizona Senate. If you really want to send a message to Washington, you can do it by electing a member of the Arizona Green Party to the U.S. Senate, believe me. So go to your computers, go to jocelynforsenate.com, get that name recognition thing going. We can actually make it happen. I really enjoyed this evening and meeting everybody. And thank you, Arizona.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, gentlemen. This has been a very enlightening discussion, and thank you very much. This will wrap up this 3TV special, the U.S. Senate debate. We want to thank again all the candidates for an enlightening discussion, and thank you at home for being with us. From all of us here at 3TV, good night.